Hi, everyone. My name is Shanae Murray. I'm class of 2010 from the Empire State Building campus, proudly part of the House of Truth and the King's Dancers. I don't know if that's still a thing with the with the current student body, but we sure had a lot of fun with it back then. I live in Miami, Florida. I work for Royal Caribbean, and I'm extremely proud and happy to be introducing our guest speaker today, Miss Dawn Fotopulos. Yay! I miss you so much.
Oh gosh, I miss you too, Jackie Smith. Welcome. Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Dawn, it's so good to see your face.
Jackie.
Lynn Mitchell. Oh my gosh, it's Christmas. It's so good to see you. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Here we go.
Mark.
All right, now we've got some people coming in. Awesome. Well, thank you for those that just joined us. The discussion topic for today with Professor Fotopulos is the power of seed. The best education doesn't just teach students, it transforms them into different people. So let's discuss how this process takes place and how the King's College has launched thousands, oh, I lost my screen here, has launched thousands of students into the world to bring that light and life wherever God has called them. So Professor Fotopulos doesn't need much of an introduction, but I'm going to give a little bit of a bio for those of you who might not have been one of her students. So Dawn Fotopulos teaches principles of management, business strategy, and marketing after spending over 20 years in business as a Wall Street trader, a vice president at Citigroup, and serial entrepreneur. She challenges her students to speak the truth with grace and to cultivate integrity and character in the face of difficulty. She says, "For every hour I give to students, the Lord multiplies my life and redeems my trials." She has cultivated many meaningful relationships with students and still stays in contact with graduates all over the world. She has a bachelor's in management and marketing from Cornell and an MBA with distinction from New York University. She enjoys attending classical musical concerts, gardening, spending time with her family at their home in Shelter Island. And before I hand it over to you, Dawn, I do want to say that I have moved from 4 different cities since graduation in 2010, 8 different apartments, and I still have my PMO notebook, which I don't know if you can see this, but my notes from City Storage. And when you had Norm Brodsky come and guest speak in our class, so I kept these notes through all of those moves since graduation. Guys, she is the absolute best. So I hope that you enjoyed today's discussion. Dawn, I'll turn it over to you.
I don't think there's much else to say. Thank you, Shanae. Thank you. That was incredibly gracious.
Can't hear you, Dawn.
Okay, am I muted? No, I'm not muted. Can you hear me now?
You're really faint.
Yes, you're really faint, Dawn.
That's so odd because we could hear you really well previously.
Mm-hmm.
Improve my sound quality.
That's better.
There we go.
Is it really?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Great.
Wow, son of a gun. Okay, well, excellent. Well, you know, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I never intended to be a college professor. This was never my aspiration. And I expected to be a banker for the rest of my career. I figured I would work for Citibank or one of the other big banks in the city and retire from there. And in 1993, I had a very serious car accident. I probably shouldn't be here, but God had other plans. And I suffered spinal injury actually in that car accident. And I was unable to work the number of hours and the kind of grueling pace that banking required, at least in the job that I was in. And I took a leave of absence, a medical leave of absence from Citibank. And I was teaching at King's as an adjunct. And I was absolutely expecting to get some treatment and go back. And It was in the Empire State Building. I was teaching at night, which we don't do anymore. And I had 5 students who showed up, 4 of whom never did their assignments. And there was 1 student who was paying attention. And it got to the point where I was unable to go back to banking. And I went before the Lord and I said, this has got to be a cruel joke. I mean, I've worked so hard in corporate life all these years, and if you wanted to bury me, you couldn't do a better job of it, right? Teaching in the evening classes, 5 students, only 1 is paying attention in the bowels of the Empire State Building. And the Holy Spirit came to me and asked a question. You know how he does. He's so good at those questions. And he said, are you here for your glory or for mine? That was the first question. And then the second question was, if I bring you one of my sheep, will you give that person everything you have? And I said, okay. And 1 became 20, became 50, became 100. And after 16 years, I think it'll be 17 at the end of the spring semester, which is hard to fathom. It's been about 3,200 students that have been through my classrooms in all that time.
Wow.
And a number of you are living testimonies. I wanted to talk about the power of seed because I was so, you know, I never had time to garden. And I'm fascinated by the way the Lord has set the world up. And so I have a question for you, lest you think this is going to be a lecture and you're not going to participate. Let me clue you that you will participate. So I have a question. This is a picture. Can everybody see my photograph? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What is this? What are these?
Acorns.
They're acorns. Anybody else? Okay. You know what this is?
It's a twig.
Yeah. Paul.
Seed.
Okay. What is it, Lynn?
A seed.
A seed. Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. So let's define it's what it is. Let's talk about what its function is. This acorn is 100% of the DNA of all the genetic material that is required to grow that tree, a 60-foot tall oak tree. This tiny little package is a miracle. And think about this for a minute. Not only does it contain all the DNA to get there, but inside of this seed is infinity. Think about this for a second. This tree is about 90 years old. And every year it generates a whole lot of those, like tens of thousands of them. So if this tree is 90 years old and it generates 10,000, you know, we're all about the numbers, right? 10,000 acorns a year times 90 years, that's 100,000 acorns. And inside each of those acorns, you have a tree like this that can generate how many other hundreds of thousands and millions of acorns. So when we have good seed, it is designed, seed by its nature is designed to replicate itself. But there's a catch. It has to be sown under the right conditions in order for it to meet its destiny. Because the acorn is just the seed, it's not its destiny. This is its destiny. The tree is its destiny. And the tree is designed, again, to replicate itself many times over. So what do we know about growing an oak tree? Well, the acorn has to be planted, and we thank our friends, the squirrels, in the fall for this. They think it's food, but we know there's a bigger story here. And they squirrel things away, and they dig and they plant these things, let's say 6 or 8 inches under the surface of the earth. But then they have to go through great trial. They have to freeze in the wintertime. If they do not go through that frozen season, the DNA will not be activated. they've got to freeze. And then in the springtime, when the rains come, they have to have enough water to germinate, but not so much water that they rot. And then as they germinate and the leaves come, there has to be enough sunshine for photosynthesis, but not so much that they dry up. So the conditions around this little brilliant package has to be just so in order to generate, in order for that little seed to reach its destiny. And as I think about, as we think about seed, there is good seed in good soil, and there is bad seed in bad soil. And the truth of the matter is, no matter what type of seed it is, whether good or bad, and we can argue as to what bad is in quotes or what good is in quotes, it's still designed to replicate itself. And when we take a look, I'm not going to get political now, but if you take a look at the fruit of higher education in the United States, there is a lot of bad fruit. There's been a lot of indoctrination that has gone on in higher ed, and this has been going on for many generations, really post World War II. And when you take a lie and you promote it across the disciplines, and you take the truth out of the equation, you end up with unbelievable dislocations and people who think they're fighting for something that is true and good and honorable and right, but in fact, they're fighting for something that is destructive. So bad seed is designed to replicate itself, but good seed is designed to replicate itself too. And we are in the business of good seed. Everybody who comes to the King's College and who has come to the King's College since 1938 is good seed in good soil. And we've heard the stories, Lynn Mitchell, you know, we've heard the stories of what the camaraderie was like in the earlier years prior to 1999. We've seen the relationships, we've seen the fruit of the earlier generations of alumni that have been gone all over the world. They've been involved in ministry, they're involved in business, they're involved in publishing, in every area of life. Jim O'Brien is like 1 degree of separation. He knows where everybody is. And we've heard those great stories. And what we have seen as a result of that is recognizing that when you take a seed and you plant it in soil, when a student comes to the King's College, they have not reached their destiny. Our job is to create those conditions under which that seed can grow. We don't cause the growth, God does, right? All we can do is provide the conditions. But what our job is, right, is to plant truth in your life. And as we do that, plant truth and grace, that's John 1:15. That's my life's verse, right? Shanae talked about that, because we need to face the ugly, hard things. Life is hard, and we live in a broken world. So we need to understand it and we need to view it accurately so that our thoughts are not distorted, right? But thoughts become ideas. They're not random. They're shaped into ideas and assumptions about the world, how the world works, what human nature is all about. One of the things that I love so much about King's, and frankly, I wish I had this when I was going to Cornell, was the access to the PP&E core. I'm a business professor, and all of our business students were required to take PP&E courses, and a lot of them, much to their chagrin, were not too thrilled about that. But I have to say, there's so much wisdom in structuring a curriculum like that. And I'm preaching to the choir. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but, you know, to understand history, right? And using the Bible, not just as a history book, but as a book of great wisdom, and also a book that draws us closer to our Creator, so we understand the why of why we're here, who He is, what our mission in life is. So the students who come to King's who are paying attention, They don't have to wait until they lie on their deathbed to figure out what life is all about. They get that really early on in their lives. And if they didn't get it at home, they'll get it at King's. So those thoughts shape ideas. Ideas shape a lens, right? That lens through which we look at the world. And truth and grace is important because that lens has to be clear and non-distortive. And then it shapes our assumptions. And those assumptions then shape our beliefs. Our beliefs shape our convictions. What do we think is good and honorable and right and of good report? And what is not, right? Where is the line in the sand? Really important. And then ultimately those convictions become actions and behavior. It becomes the way we operate in the world, the way we treat other people, the way we set priorities in our lives, the way we steward the resources that God has given to us, including the time that he gives us on the earth and the treasure that comes in our direction and the talent that he has given us and that he has given us here at the King's College to help nurture in each of our students. Thoughts generate ideas, generate assumptions, beliefs, convictions, and then ultimately actions. So the truth is really important. It is absolutely required for life. It is absolutely non-negotiable because when we plant our feet on the truth, then we are not tossed to and fro by any good sounding rhetoric. One of the things that that we really try to do at King's, my colleagues in the PP&E majors, PP&E major, and in the theology major and politics and so on, pardon me, have a tougher task, frankly, than I do, because I spend a lot of time in the numbers. And the numbers, if they're accurately reported, they are what they are. But when it comes time to political frames of mind, when it comes down to economic theories and how to allocate resources, they have the tougher task. But when we plant our feet on the truth, what we're essentially doing is we're shutting the door to darkness. We are not allowing the lies and the distortions to enter in. The truth, I've said often, right? The truth sets us free. That's what scripture tells us. And if that is a truism, we believe it is, then it means that the lies will enslave us. So Christ died to make us free, and we are free indeed. So the truth is non-negotiable. Identity is really important. Identity is not just what we do, although as we become more known in our careers, that becomes part of our personas. But it's not what we do for a living. It's simply who we are in the kingdom of heaven. Because when we accept Christ, we are seated with him in the heavenly realms at the right hand of the Father, and we commute to work, right? So we're seated there now. We're actually seated there now. We don't have to die for that to occur. We're there now in spirit, and we know that this world is not our own. So the identity is super important. And one of the things that I've started to do at King's, because we have students that suffer from identity issues. They come from broken homes. They come from some very hard circumstances. And I've spent many man hours in my office. I have decreed that my office is a tabernacle. So anybody that comes in, you know, I'm tempted to ask them to take their shoes off, but I don't. Not because it's my office, but because the Lord is present. And I know that as I water and as I weed the good seed that God has given to me, that my primary job and my primary mission at the King's College is to reflect back to each and every precious soul that's in my classroom who they are. I hope they learn. I'm dedicated to that, but it's more important as to who they become. But they don't become unless we have a starting point. And that identity cannot be performance driven. It isn't, because Christ said it's not by works, right? It's by faith that you've been saved. So their identity is secure in him, and it's independent of the decisions their parents have made. It's independent of whether the boyfriend or girlfriend has accepted or rejected them. It is independent of the job they receive or don't receive after graduation. They are precious in the sight of God. They are absolutely precious, and they are one of a kind in the history of man. There will never be another person just like each of you on this call, and just like each of the students that come into my classrooms. So our job at King's, we water, yeah, and we do some weeding. we do some correcting, and we don't always win that soul to the truth, but it's still our job to correct when we do. And when that person understands what we're trying to say to them, because what we're really doing is advocating for their best, when they get that, we've saved a life. And we've probably saved them 20 or 30 years of torment if they really turn towards the truth, towards the things that are life-giving. But that's the grace part, yeah? You can't force somebody to respect the honor code and to act honorably. Only the Holy Spirit can motivate them from the inside out. But their identity is secure in Christ. And when they get that, they become unstoppable. Our students and our alumni become absolutely unstoppable, because then when they know their identity, they are utterly fearless. And it's so exciting for me to see it as I stand on the sidelines and watch each of you in your worlds. You are utterly fearless. Let's talk discernment for a minute. So there's a lot of rhetoric floating in the public domain, all sorts of rhetoric, and discernment is super critical because it cuts clear sight lines through that rhetoric, and you don't become a pawn in somebody else's scheme. So we don't want to teach students what to think, but we want to ask them all kinds of questions and then help guide them, right, to find the truth for themselves and to find unimpeachable sources of the truth, so that when we go away as professors, which we have to do, right, our job is to manage our way out of a job. We're not building disciples. We're building disciples of Christ out there in the world. And discernment is an absolutely mission critical function, teaching discernment or nurturing, inspiring discernment. It is only the Holy Spirit that ultimately drops those seeds of discernment in somebody's heart and mind. And character, right? Character, what is character? Well, character is who you are when no one's looking. Character are the decisions that you make when the cameras are turned off and Facebook is shut down, and you have a choice to make a decision, and you know that to take the narrow road, it's going to cost you, and it's going to cost you dearly. But you take the narrow road, and you have the courage to do that because you know there's blessing on the other side, and you know every single time you make those hard choices that it strengthens your character, but it also strengthens your relationship with the Lord. And so we can't build character. We don't have that kind of power to do that, right? I had a very interesting conversation. I was at a conference a number of years ago, and there was a guy who was an ethicist with Georgetown University, and he's a big guy, and he's nationally known, and he's a very big personality. And all of us had gathered around an open square. We're all business professors, most of us. And the question on the table was this: if we teach courses in ethics, and all the colleges that were represented there did, then how come we are graduating unethical people, or people that are exhibiting unethical behavior? So I brought up this topic of character. and how teaching must be a character shaping experience by definition. And he looked at me and he got very upset. I'll never forget it. He said, well, you can't just dial in character. You can't just go to a student and decide what their character is going to be. I said, that's absolutely right. You can't do that. I don't have that kind of power, but I can inspire it. And what I can do when they're going off the rails or they're making choices and decisions that are going to be self-destructive, I can say to them, I care enough about your future that I need to talk to you about this, because you have a choice to make. You can choose life or choose death, as it says in Deuteronomy. And I care enough about you that I'm going to tell you what I see. And I'm going to tell you what I think the outcome is going to be if you stay on this path. Because I've been on the earth a little longer. It doesn't mean I have all wisdom. I don't. But this is what I see. And this is what I have seen in the lives of others who have chosen the path you're on. But if you make your course correction now, you will avoid all that pain. I can do that. I can inspire that. And so I looked around the room at all these 25 other professors and I said, every single person in this room has had a conversation that goes something like this with your students, because you've told me that you have. You know that thing you just did? You know that paper you just copied? You know that dishonest thing that you just did? That's not your best. That's not who you are. That was the lazy way out. And I understand you were pressed for time. I understand all the pressures, but that's not who you are. I see something so much greater and so much more important in you. And I'm not going to call them out. I'm going to call them up. And that I can do. And that every single one of my colleagues does at King's. So truth, non-negotiable. It shuts the door to all the destructive lies. Because remember something, the enemy only does three things. It's all he knows how to do. And it's been true since the Garden of Eden, right? Lie, right? Lie, rob, steal, and what?
Destroy.
Okay, destroy. So Paul, let's talk about this for a minute. There is a progression here. These are not independent things. Think about this. It starts with a lie. The lie opens the door to doubt, right? And the lie is never 100% lie. It's always got 5% truth mixed in it, so that we'll swallow it whole. That's why truth and discernment become so important.
You're getting faint, Dawn.
Oh, okay. That's weird. I don't know why. It must be my, let me increase my speakers here. Okay. Is that better, everybody? Okay, so that's why truth and discernment becomes so important. And character helps us toe the line. When we're tempted, character helps us make those life-giving choices. So, you know, a seed is a lot of hope. Think about that, right? It's all that potential. It's all that hope and expectation that when we put that seed in the ground and we water it and we treat it the way it needs to, oh, by every seed needs different kind of care, right? Every student doesn't get exactly the same response from their professors. But the soil quality is really important. The seed quality is important. We got to plant it at just the right time. We've got to water it just enough. And the reason why weeding is so important is not just because if you allow a weed to grow, it will take over the entire garden. That's what scripture says. But the reason why that's so important to weed when it's young is not only is it easier to remove, but the point is weeds compete for nutrients in the soil. That's what they do. They rob the plant of nutrients, so the plant cannot reach its full growth and full fruiting potential. That's the real reason why you weed. So the environmental factors, the ones that we can control, we will control. We will provide all the input that we possibly can. And one of the things that is hard to do, but we are committed to doing that, is when each of you were in our classes and we wanted to get to know you as people too, not just students, and find out what was going on in your personal lives and find out what it was like growing up in your households, so that we understood you as full human beings. And it is so much fun to see your potential unleashed. You know, when I look at that acorn, what I see is I see pure gold. I see something that's worth more than gold. When I look at students, I see pure gold. I see hidden treasure. I see unlimited potential. And I feel like it's like a treasure hunt. Every time I have a class, a brand new class, which we did about 10 weeks ago, students that I've never met before, and as I get to know them, and as I learn about their talents, right now we're doing our blogs in the marketing course, and they're writing blogs about things that they're passionate about. It's just such a blast. And also I get to know the students, their senses of humor. I get to know a lot about where they've traveled to and what kind of relationships they have in their lives. And I learn too about their relationship with the Lord, and I can encourage them in that. And there was a young lady who wrote an amazing blog last year about the Spirit's fire. And this is a young woman who would march herself into the president's office, and she'd say, "President Gibson, I need to talk to you. The Lord gave me a word for you." And he would bring her in, and they would sit there and they would pray, because her relationship with God was so, so close and so intimate, and just an amazing lady. So we have controllable factors, right? The watering and the weeding and all of that. But then there are the uncontrollable factors. These are the trials and the challenges. And we've been through a lot as an institution. Most of you know this, not all of you do. But, you know, I've been at King's 16 years, which is amazing to me. I mean, I thought I'd be there for a year and then go someplace else, but I fell in love with my students. And frankly, I can't imagine my life without my students and without King's. But, you know, we had, at one point, we had a president who had a brain tumor. And that was devastating. I mean, it was very, very difficult. We had our chairman of the board of directors passed away of cancer, Lee Hanley, just an amazing man. And he leaves a tremendous legacy, both at King's and also a very large footprint in the world. We've had a lot of turnover in presidents at King's. We've had changes in the curriculum. We've had changes in venue. We went from Briarcliff Manor to the Empire State Building. That was a huge shift. We had, we moved from there down to Wall Street when Hurricane Sandy hit. I mean, that was some kind of crazy. There's been so many changes that were non-controllable. Of course, we've had the pandemic. I mean, one of the things that I'm so proud of with our students is that they have always stepped up to the challenge, whatever it was. And they have done such an amazing job this year. If you speak to one of our existing students, I know many of you have connections to your houses, and I hope you reach out to existing students and just give them some encouragement. This is not an easy semester. It's not an easy season, but everybody shows up for their lectures. Everybody has met their deadlines. They're doing their assignments. We're having a blast online. It's not quite the same as face-to-face. In some ways, it's actually better, because there are no cheap seats. There are no, difficult to view places. Everybody has, the same view. And office hours are very intimate, because I can have them, online, and I can see, and they can see me, I can see them very well. But a lot of them are non-controllable factors, but there's something. Let's talk about trial and meeting our destiny and a tree reaching maturity. There's as much growth that goes on beneath the surface as above the surface. And so that oak tree that I showed you before, that was 60 feet tall, for every foot above the surface, the roots are a foot below the surface. And those roots have to dig deep, because when the storms come, those roots are the only thing that will prevent that tree from toppling. And there's a process called hardening off. tomato plants have to go through this process where they must be subjected to strong winds in order for their stems to thicken. There is a response that that's in the plant's DNA, that when the strong winds come, the plant automatically gets tougher and it survives these strong winds, and then it can survive to maturity, but it must go through that trial. And New York City is a tough place, as you know, to go to school. But when our students graduate, and you guys, oh my gosh, you guys are the best testimony of this. So the harvest, what's the harvest at King's? You know, our sophomores in Principles of Management, we do a case at the end of the semester called Ernest Shackleton and the Adventure of the Endurance, which was the ship that he took to the South Pole. And it was truly a miraculous trip. Everybody should have died. The ship went down, and against all the odds, he saved every single one of the men on his ship. Let me just get rid of these pop-ups here. At any rate, I asked our students, and I do this every semester, I say, so you're going through class, you're here at King's. Shackleton has left a legacy. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? Make believe it's 70 years from now. How do you want to be remembered? And these were some of their comments. Someone said, I want to be someone who brings light and joy to others. There's nothing about management in that. It's about their identity and who they want to be and how they want to operate in the world. Someone else said she was firmly rooted in Christ and lived her life from this foundation. She loved others deeply and consistently. One wrote, I want to be a great man, a worker, a brother, a son, a human. I always want to spread love into the hearts of others. I want to be known that I never quit and that I build Jesus's name more than mine, and that I showed the love of Christ to as many as I could, a loving friend and faithful servant of Christ. I mean, this thrills me to get this feedback. There are so many others I could share with you, but let them understand what life is really all about. And then they can come to the table of their businesses and of their disciplines, and they recognize that the most important thing is what they invest in the lives of others. And what we do for a living becomes a pretext for that, right? So in 16 years, I counted 3,500 students, 3,500 seeds into society, each and every one of them. And they are in the United States, all of you, right? In China, they're in Morocco, Germany, France, South America, Mexico. And what I didn't put in here is Albania, which I meant to include. Eastern Europe, the poorest country in Eastern Europe. How exciting is it to have King's College graduates in the poorest country in Eastern Europe? And there are two sisters, Gerta Uzairai Hagen and her sister Arissa, who are now married with their own children. And if ever there was a prime minister who was a woman in Albania, it would be Gerta, because this woman has the guts of 10 Roman legions. And courageous, faithful, loving, and absolutely fearless. So if one can set 1,000 to flee and two can set 10,000 to flee, imagine the power and the multiplier effect in society by having 3,500 in the world, good seeds in good soil, dropping deep roots and spreading their leaves and spreading their fruit everywhere they go. So Natalie Hustak is one of these great seeds. She's a recent graduate. She is a business major. I know her very well. She is as brilliant as she is beautiful. She was the Jyoti Ford Award winner last year. And she was the chief operating officer for a startup in Brooklyn. I want to go through a few people. Inoma Osakwe, her family came from Nigeria. I mean, this girl is absolutely off the charts. She's brilliant. She has her own business. She's incredibly tech savvy. We're so thrilled to call her our own. She started something called The Table, coming to the table to talk about racial issues and to bring a level of sensitivity to Kings that we did not have before, quite honestly. And she did us a great service and leaves a great legacy in that. Carter Fletcher is a fabulous human being. Now he's a husband. Alexandria is his wife. She was also one of my students. She was an MCA student. So we are raising up young men to be good husbands and good fathers and faithful people and men of integrity. Holly Hall Tate, I love this picture of you. This just captures absolutely perfect, right? You are unstoppable, unquenchable, and
Oh, Holly.
yeah, absolutely unquenchable. And the thing that is exciting to me about what Holly's doing is everything you're doing is about placing talented people in the right roles in the church and in parachurch organizations. So the word of God can go out and these institutions can meet their destiny. She worked for has worked for Vanderbloemen Group for many years in Texas. We've got Peter Fleming, who's a new dad. Look at that precious little face. You know, raising up men of integrity in the church, in society, to be faithful men of God and faithful to their spouses and to their families is really thrilling for me, because there was tremendous breakdown of this when I was coming of age, and it heartens me to see the Peter Flemings and the Carter Fletchers. Anjanette Sullivan, who's on the left in this wonderful shot, she's an attorney. She's a public defender down in Florida. We had a spectacular conversation at homecoming last year, and I'm so proud of her. She is courageous, she is smart, and she's as beautiful as she is smart. Look at the quality of the people that have come through the King's College. I wish I could take credit for it, but I'm too wise for that. I know better. It's just that God has blessed us with amazing people like you on this call. Elizabeth Lindo and I, Liz was one of my students. When she took business strategy with me, I asked everybody at the beginning of the course, it's one of the last courses they take in the business program, in the business map, and they're running $40 million businesses through a simulation as CEOs. And it's a pretty intimidating prospect when they first get into class. And I asked her, I said, what are you most afraid of? We went around the room. She said, I'm afraid that I won't make it in the world, that I won't be good enough. And in those 15 weeks that we spent together in this course, she absolutely nailed managing a publicly traded $40 million business through this simulation. She was absolutely nailed it. And she was the Joe T. Ford Award winner the year she graduated. And I had the pleasure of giving her the award. And I said, Liz, when you asked me that question at the beginning of the semester, I said to you, I know the answer to that question, but over the next 15 weeks, you're going to discover it for yourself. And at graduation, I asked her that question back again. And I said, so what's the answer? She said, I think I'm going to be okay. And I said, you're going to be more than okay. So Gerta Hagen is the woman I was describing to you in Albania. And this was the picture from homecoming last year. We've got Dr. Tubbs. We have, you know, oh my gosh, John Seidel and his wife. We have the Meisingers here. We have just an incredible crowd. There's Anjanette on the far right side. We have Hope Hodge Sek there with her husband and her two little babies. And you guys are the fulfillment of, I'm going to get emotional. You guys are the fulfillment of Isaiah 61. And I want to read it to you so that you can see what I see. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on you, because the Lord has anointed you to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent you out to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. And most importantly, you will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. That's who you are. That is your destiny.
Wow. Love it.
Dawn, that was amazing. Ugh, that was
So
wonderful.
every time I hear about what you're doing, I see your wonderful faces, and I hear your stories. This is the narrative that goes on in my head that the Lord has given to me for you.
Well, thank you, Dawn. We are so grateful. Words cannot express my personal gratitude for you. I would not be anywhere near where I am in so many areas of my life if it wasn't for your faithfulness and your support and your love and belief in me. And I don't believe in myself. And I know there's so many on the call that feel that same way. So thank you for spending the time to hear from the Lord about what to share with us today and investing in us. We technically are at our time, but if you have time, Dawn,
Yes,
do you have time for maybe like
I
2
do.
questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So I'm going to moderate for us. Because there's about 14 of us, I think I'm going to try. If you have a question, if you want to unmute yourself and ask Dawn, I think we have time for 2. So who would like to go first?
Oh, wow.
Hi.
Caps
Can I
in my
ask?
blood sugar. Yes, of course.
Hi, Professor Fotopulos. Well, thank you first of all for sharing. It's very nice to hear you speak again.
Mm.
I was wondering, interested what you said about discernment and also about truth being through numbers, at least in the realm of business. And I was thinking about that in relation to myself as an accountant. It's really easy to get like stuck in the numbers sometimes, and like in a sense, I'm seeing the truth or like the numbers, but oftentimes it's easy just to see the numbers and not to see the bigger picture behind everything, and kind of extrapolating that to life in general, in terms of discernment. What do you think about, I guess, like
Well,
circumstances where we can see the truth,
yes.
but we don't really see, what is the bigger picture behind that, and how do we
Well,
discern that?
well, you've got to ask some questions, Mark. Are you an accountant? Are you a CPA?
Yes.
Oh, how exciting. I did not realize that. Okay. Okay.
Hey,
Well,
Dawn, can I ask, can you unshare your screen so we can see your
oh,
face
yes, of
better?
course. Of course. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share. How about that? There we go. Okay, thank you, Holly. Numbers tell a story. They always tell a story. There's always a story behind the numbers. And so you have to start asking some questions. Why are things the way they are, right? How did we get here? So if we're looking at financial statements, for example, there's Emily Collins Nielsen. Good to see you, Emily. Wow, what a treat. Steve Peterson, oh my goodness, Stephen, so good to see you. I didn't realize you joined us. But so I have a situation right now with a CPA who she's looking at the numbers, and things are really going south. And so she needs to start asking the business owner what's going on. And she's uncovered some really scary stuff that if they don't deal with it, they're not going to have a business in 6 months. This is a business that's been around for 40 years. So, this is a person who has the opportunity to do an intervention. And for the people who are the keepers of the numbers, they're keepers of reality. They are the keepers of the truth. And they have a sacred role. They really do. And you can take that role one of 2 ways. You can cross the T's and dot the I's on the road to perdition. Yeah. Okay. So we filed with the IRS, but the business went bankrupt. Or you can see the inflection points and the changes and go back to the business owner and say, do you realize that this and this and this is at risk? Let's understand why things are the way they are and what can we do differently in the future to have a better outcome. And then the numbers become the merit of the business. The numbers become the testimony. That's really what numbers are. They're a testimony of what's really going on. I don't know if that answered your question, Mark, but that's how I would view it.
Yeah, I think it does. I never
Yeah.
thought about them in terms of being a testimony.
Oh yeah, that's what they are. Yep,
Very interesting.
yep.
Wonderful. Anybody else have a question for Dawn before we sign off today?
Not so much as a question, but just a comment. Professor Fotopulos, something that I have always remembered and kept at the front of my mind with each new role and company that I've gone to is something you always said to us was, in whatever position you find yourself, make sure you make yourself irreplaceable. And so important at your non-for-profit, at your corporate environment, wherever you are, make yourself irreplaceable for that company, for that entity. And I just want to say that you are absolutely irreplaceable for the King's College. And I just want to thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That is so dear. Thank you, Shanae. Thank you. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. So as you were answering Mark's question, it made me think of the show The Prophet on CNBC.
Yes.
Yeah, how he goes into businesses, and sometimes many times the issues are about the partners or the owner's character that's causing the numbers to be all way off skew. So yeah, I could see how, and I think I don't know if he's a believer or anything, the host, but he definitely uncovers character issues a lot with those leaders, those business leaders. And then once they fix that, they tend to get better numbers. So I see your point about the numbers being a testimony.
Yeah, it's a dependent variable. You don't manage the numbers, you manage the process and the people. Then the numbers will show up, hopefully, reflect that. But Lynn Mitchell, you're much smarter about all of that than I am.
In fact, I make a living from that very thing, right?
Yes, yes, and you know, and Lynn has an interesting background. She's called in by the insurance companies when there's all kinds of shenanigans going on. So she's a professional sleuth, and she uses the numbers to really bubble up what's really going on. So you keep digging until you get at the truth, and you have some amazing stories. We actually had the privilege of writing up some of those stories and presenting them in our business strategy class, which hopefully we can do again this coming semester. But it was really eye-opening, just wonderful.